So in this video, I'm going to share with you 6 books I read in 2021 that I really liked. They span a bunch of different categories. Each of them, what they have in common is that they really made me think or make some changes in my life. So that's literally the only criteria that I'm grading these best books on, is that they changed my thinking or my behavior in some way. So the first one is 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. Oliver Burkeman's book was definitely one of my favorites in the productivity category this year. And it's funny because it's sort of positioned as like an anti-productivity book. Burkeman shares in the book about how he was like all in on the productivity stuff, but now he's kind of chosen to slow down, pare down, be a little bit more deliberate with his life. And a lot of this book is about just the concept that, look, you don't have that long with this life, and so you need to make the most of enjoying it. Even though it didn't come from a Christian perspective, I really appreciated the thoughtfulness that the author gave to this. I think productivity is more than just like getting as much as you possibly can get done. I think it's about living a life that matters. It's living a life that counts, not just here, but in eternity. That's really my big thing. I want to serve the Lord with my life. And so I like this book because it made me slow down, reflect a bit more on how I'm spending my time. Am I sort of overdoing it, overcommitting myself, or kind of pretending that I'm not immortal with limited time? Here's just one of my favorite quotes from the book. He says, "Every decision to use a portion of time on anything represents the sacrifice of all the other ways in which you could have spent that time, but didn't. And to willingly make that sacrifice is to take a stand without reservation on what matters most to you." And that really summarizes what the book's about. He's saying you need to admit that you're mortal, that you are not going to live forever, that all of your plans will not get done, and make decisions and own them and throw your whole self into what you're doing at this moment. The second book on my list is The Bitcoin Standard. I really liked this book. I got into Bitcoin last year during all the COVID stuff, and the more I've sort of gone down the rabbit hole, the more I've learned, not just about Bitcoin itself, but about money, how the monetary system works, in the United States at least, and how Bitcoin proposes to answer some of the problems with our current system. I think the fact is there's always going to be a strong correlation between technology, productivity, and money, and so it's good to have an awareness of what's happening with technology and with money, because that's going to factor in to your productivity, to your work. And that's why I'm interested in Bitcoin, and that's how it kind of connects for me to the world of productivity as a Christian. And this book is basically the essential reading. This is the deep dive on the subject of the history of money, the problems that Bitcoin purports to solve, how it actually works, the philosophy behind it. And I think even if you have a fleeting interest in Bitcoin at all, or in cryptocurrency in general, this is really good reading. You can go a lot deeper with this book than with some of the articles you'll find online, and definitely the stuff you'll find in the news, which is almost always wrong about this subject. Here's one of my favorite quotes from the book. "Sound money allows people to think about the long term and to save and invest more for the future. Sound money is also an essential element of a free society, as it provides for an effective bulwark against despotic government." The third book on my list is one that I talk about probably more than any other book except for the Bible, and that's Deep Work by Cal Newport. I reread this modern classic as part of our book club in Redeeming Productivity Academy, and this time around, I mean, look at all those notes I made. I really tried to summarize this. In fact, I have a whole article I'll link to in the description here of a huge summary I wrote of this book in specific ways I think Christians can apply some of the principles from this to our lives. I've already said so much about deep work in other places that I'll just leave you with one of my favorite quotes from the book. "You'll struggle to achieve the deepest levels of concentration if you spend the rest of your time fleeing the slightest hint of boredom." Highly recommended. Read this book if you've never read it. The next book on my list is Live Not by Lies. The subtitle of this book is A Manual for Christian Dissidents, and it's by Rod Dreher, who wrote the Benedict option as well. We're seeing the world's government shift a lot towards what Dreher calls soft totalitarianism, where they're trying to exercise more control in our lives. The only thing anybody has ever done in history to stop the march of tyranny in governments is for morally grounded believers to stand up and refuse to play along with the lies, which is always how tyranny advances. Is there's this threat that if you don't go along with the narrative, then you're going to be canceled or killed in some cases. And I think that we really need to get our lives in order, make sure we're walking with the Lord, so that, heaven forbid, this tyranny hardens even more into the future. We have the spiritual fortitude to actually stand up against it. This is one of my favorite quotes from the book. We cannot hope to resist the coming soft totalitarianism if we do not have our spiritual lives in order. I think sort of the big takeaway for me from this is you need to be prepared for coming persecution or pressure or, people trying to turn the screws on you to compromise. You have to be prepared in advance for that. And the only way to be prepared is to be walking faithfully with the Lord now. You don't know when persecution is coming. You don't know when you're going to be tempted to give in to something that you know isn't right. And the only way to be ready for that is to always be ready, which is to walk with the Lord daily. And so that's why I think it's so important to be disciplined in our spiritual lives so that we can be ready no matter what comes our way. Next on the list is Business Made Simple by Donald Miller. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Donald Miller's Christian books. He's the guy who wrote Blue Like Jazz. I don't like a lot of the stuff he wrote in the mid-2000s, but his stuff on business and like StoryBrand, I really like. I really found like he's hit his stride. In 2021, I somehow stumbled into doing Redeeming Productivity full time, and I don't really know anything about business. I don't have a background in it, and so I've kind of been learning on the fly. This book, out of all the books I've read this year, just packed the most value per page. It gave me a great framework for what it takes to run a successful business. And I feel like I got the categories I need from this and this like big lattice work that I can sort of build out my skills in different areas and my understanding. But this has been like a map for me to learn the basics of business. So if you have a business or you want to get into business or you're just trying to learn some of this stuff, this is huge. One of my favorite quotes from the book, he says, "This is the secret to success. If you want to succeed in work, love, friendship, and life, give the people around you a great return on whatever it is they invest in you." And that's kind of the principle that runs through the whole book, is provide value to the people around you. And the last book on the list of favorite books I read in 2021 is The Household and the War for the Cosmos by C.R. Wiley. Having kids has really reshaped my priorities. Kind of my center of focus is a lot more on my family and on the future of what my kids will be and making sure that I have a strong household. This book has really shaped my thinking a lot in the last year about that God has designed the family unit as this like fundamental building block of society. And the investment I make into my family isn't just for like my own entertainment and joy, because I love being with my kids, I love being with my wife, but it's significant on a cosmic level in society, obviously, in politics, but there really is this like spiritual and eternal significance to building up a strong family. And I just love the way that this book cast that, and it just made me think about family from a different perspective. Here's my favorite quote from the book. "The institutions as the foundation of our way of life don't seem solid any longer, and the most important of these institutions is the household." What I really love is it just gives you a basis for action. You wonder if you see the world around you and you think, man, things are really turning to pot. Well, you know what I can do? I can build a strong family, division, but I definitely know that I can affect a lot through building a strong family. Because if all the other bricks in the wall are weak, at least I can make sure that my family, my brick in society, is strong and solid. So I liked the book. As I was looking at all the books I read this year, I was a little surprised, honestly, at how few Christian books I read. Most of them were made up of productivity books or business books. And now this is natural because I literally write and talk about productivity for a living, so that's fine. And I run a business now, so that's fine. But yeah, I think my balance is a little bit off there. I need to make sure I'm still filling my mind with books that are focused on God and His Word and worldview and truth. So in light of that, here are a few changes I want to make for my reading strategy in 2022. First, I want to read more Christian books. My plan is that if I'm gonna have a bias towards reading productivity and business books, I'm gonna make sure that I set a rule for myself that for every 3 books, at least one of them needs to be a Christian book. The second change I wanna make for 2022 in terms of reading is I wanna read 50 books, which is roughly a book a week. And I used to do this every year, but this year, life was in such disarray at the beginning of the year. I wasn't even counting the books. I didn't have a list of what I was reading. It was just chaos. So my cadence got up to about a book of the week near the end of this year, but I want to really strategize for 2022 to make sure that I just hold that as kind of a loose goal, around 50 books for the year. And that kind of keeps me on target and makes sure that I don't get out of the habit of reading a little bit each day. And the third change I want to make in my reading strategy for 2022 is I want to focus on the back catalog. I have a ton of books, and like any bibliophile, I kind of tend to buy more books than I actually read. And there are a lot of books I have that I've never read that are great. I know they're great. They've been recommended to me a million times, but I've never read them. And so one of the things I want to do in 2022 is have a bias towards reading books I already own so that I'm not just spending a bunch of money and just putting more stuff on my shelf, but also because, hey, I already have it. Why not read it? So I would love to hear from you guys. What books were your favorites that you read in 2021? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that caused you to make significant change in your life? And another question would be, what are your reading goals for 2022? Have you set some goals? What are you trying to do? Is it reasonable? I would just love to hear what you guys are thinking in the comments. If you're interested in the topic of productivity from a Christian perspective, I write a weekly newsletter that I actually write every week, and I don't go 2 months without doing, like these videos. So if you like that topic, I'd encourage you to sign up. Just go to newsletter.redeemingproductivity.com. There's also a link in the description. And when you sign up, I actually send you a free morning routine planner, just as like a, hey, thanks, here you go. So check it out. It's newsletter.redeemingproductivity.com for productivity from a Christian worldview. Thanks, guys. I'll see you in the next video.